and engaging the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. They withdrew through the gaps in the Principes, who then threw their pila, drew their swords, and charged the enemy a second time. Usually this broke an enemy army. If it did not, the Principes withdrew behind the Triarii. This dire battlefield situation gave rise to the common Roman saying, "So it has come to the Triarii." This phrase being used to describe an intense, desperate, or stressful situation in everyday life. This style of Roman army completed the conquest of Italy and defeated the Empire of Carthage. The Republican Roman manipular system was so successful that it made itself obsolete. As the empire grew, Rome's campaigns were further away, and they took longer to complete, which reduced the morale of its conscripted citizen soldiers. The empire became too large to effectively use a levy system, designed for a city-state to wage summer campaigns against local neighbors. Property owners, supplying their own arms and armor, was no longer efficient on such a large scale. Most importantly, there was a massive manpower shortage. The minimum property requirement to serve in the army was reduced several times, but that was still not enough to meet the empire's demand. In 107 BC, the Roman general and politician Gaius Marius enacted numerous military reforms, including but not limited to the removal of any property requirement for enlistment in the military. Soldiers were now provided their equipment by the state. Previous classes of infantry were homogenized. All legionaries were equipped as heavy infantry, with pilum, gladius, and chainmail. Most importantly, legionaries became professional soldiers. As early as the 4th century BC, some payments were made to compensate soldiers for their time out on campaign. But these payments were inconsistent and constantly subject to renegotiation. It was not uncommon for a Republican Roman soldier to return home from a long campaign financially ruined, with small-scale farmers being particularly vulnerable. Marius gathered the citizen landless poor and filled Rome's legions. They were relatively well paid and enlisted for up to 16 years in the legion. Around the time of Marius's reforms, the larger and simpler cohort replaced the maniple as the core strategic and organizational unit within the legion. This style of army was used through the late Republic and was the basis for the Imperial Roman Legion. If you enjoyed this video, I believe you'll also enjoy the video I have done on the Imperial Roman Legionary, or the late Roman infantryman. A big thanks to my patrons who support the creation of these videos, and all of you subscribers, likers, and commenters who make this channel possible. This has been Epimetheus. Thank you so much for watching. The Roman Empire has the rare distinction of being both one of the largest and longest-lasting empires in human history. During the 1st century AD, the Imperial Roman Legionary played a central role in the rapid expansion and consolidation of the empire. These professional soldiers, numbering over 150,000, were among the most successful in history, which brought the Roman state to the height of its power. Their accomplishments were achieved through rigorous training, discipline, as well as having the latest and greatest infantry equipment of the era. The ancient Imperial Roman Legionary wore a simple tunic, which was often dyed red, as well as being associated with Mars, the Roman god of war, who mythologically sired Rome's founders Romulus and Remus. Red dye was cheap and readily available in most areas of the empire. Typically, madder root was used for red dye production, which could also easily be dried and exported. Most legionary tunics were either made of wool or linen, which was thinner and lighter, which made it the favored material for hotter climates and summer months. Because it did not retain most dyes available to the Romans very well, linen was usually bleached white or left in a natural off-white state. Other cheaper colors, such as green, obtained through a variety of plant-based dyes, brown and black were also used to a lesser extent. It has also been hypothesized that Roman legionaries assigned for naval duty as Marines wore blue. Associated with Neptune, god of the sea, blue dye was also relatively inexpensive, although not as cheap as red. A Roman legionary recruit was required to be able to march 22 miles in less than 6 hours, wearing armor and carrying a full pack. weighing at least 45 pounds. Roman legions frequently marched 20 to 30 miles in a day before seizing strategic locations, a battlefield of their choosing, or making camp. It has often been noted the Roman army defeated their enemies on many occasions simply by outmarching them. To accomplish this, the legionary needed some formidable footwear. The caliga was a heavy-duty sandal boot that had hobnails hammered into the thick sole, enabling it to grip the ground better, in the same way as a modern sports cleat. The hobnail pattern on the bottom of the boot also had a similar function to that of a modern sports shoe, with ball, arch, and heel support. The ancient Roman author Juvenal cautioned civilians against antagonizing a legionary, who in retaliation might kick their shins, leaving a nasty wound. In the hot Mediterranean climate, the open lattice-like design of the upper portion of the boot allowed for efficient ventilation, which reduced sweaty feet and blisters. This design also allowed the boot to drain and dry quickly after crossing rivers and streams. In winter months and cooler climates, the legionary would opt for the socks and sandals look. In northern regions, trousers and a variety of enclosed boot designs were commonly worn for much of the year. The Emperor Gaius Julius Caesar, who was named after his more famous relative of the same name, is more commonly known by his infamous nickname, Caligula. Caligula means little boots. The soldiers his father commanded gave him the endearing nickname, as he wore a miniature uniform and miniature caligae, while accompanying his father on campaign as a child. Along with the caligae, the military belt was another item closely tied to the legionary's identity. Josephus writes how the sounds of jingling belts and the crunch of iron hobnails on their shoes announced the presence of a soldier. The sound of many thousands of legionaries marching in step was intended to inspire awe or fear. The soldier's belt was a great source of pride for the legionary. Often, additional details and embellishments were added to personalize the belt. The leather straps with metal studs and ornaments hanging from the belt provided a degree of groin protection, which is important, but it was primarily aesthetic, and was shortened and went out of style in the 2nd century AD. Wearing the belt tightly also helped to distribute some of the weight of the armor from the shoulders to the hips. Often beneath the military belt, a cloth waistband was worn, which protected the stomach and back from chafing caused by the belt and armor. The waistband was also folded in such a manner so that it served as a pocket to store money or whatever small items the legionary wished to carry on his person. In the early 1st century, along with the introduction of segmented plate armor, a scarf became standard issue to prevent scarring and chafing around the tight-fitting neck plates. Soldiers wearing older scale and mail armor adopted its use shortly afterwards. The fashionable scarves were also worn off-duty and identified a man as a soldier. It has been hypothesized that the color of the legionary scarf signified what unit he belonged to. This is reasonable to assume, as it would have been cheaper and easier to supply than maintaining uniform tunic color. Tunics wore out quickly due to heavy use and were replaced often, using whatever color fabric was available. The legionary is primarily thought of as a swordsman, charging forward into the enemy and using his sword to thrust, rather than slash. The legionary's gladius was a short thrusting and chopping